Albert stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly. No, this couldn't go on like this anymore. Someday, he might just snap, and something irreversible could happen. Today, he had felt the urge to lash out at his beloved wife with all his might when she and her mother started their favorite topic, how useless he was. And this wasn't the first time. While they used to gossip about him quietly amongst themselves before, now they openly discussed what he amounted to. Albert stayed silent. Once he had attempted to speak up, but Gloria immediately took their son's hand and went to her mother. He couldn't do it without Luis. His son meant everything to him. He had to swallow his pride and visit, though he regretted it 1,000 times afterwards. Well, divorced fathers communicate with their kids, especially since no one could stop him. He was a normal man working as a detective in the police force, and that's what his wife disliked. Not just that he was a detective, but how much he earned. It made her scoff after watching police movies. Everyone lives by taking bribes for the family, not for work. Only my blessed husband tries to be honest. He would retreat to another room to try to avoid the argument, but it was futile. When Luis wasn't home, he would give his wife a stern look and say, "Just be quiet." She would get scared and fall silent. But now, she started to initiate these conversations only when their son was around, and it worked even better when her mother was present. It always began the same way. The mother-in-law would call Luis and start handing out sweets, saying, "Here, Luis, some candy and a chocolate bar for you, and pears, here's more. Eat up, my grandson, with a father like yours, bread will become a rarity." Albert gritted his teeth, but remained silent. He didn't want his son to witness how ugly their arguments were. However, Gloria would immediately pick up where her mother left off. "Oh, Mom, don't even say it. The faucet in the bathroom is dripping, and we can't afford to fix it. I'll have to ask you for money." "Gloria, I understand everything. Of course, I'll give you whatever you need. How can we live without money? We can't manage without money. That's why your father still works even after retiring. We've never been the type of family to let our loved ones suffer for the sake of ideals." Albert would stand up and leave without saying a word, but his wife's voice would keep getting louder. "Mom, it's just so frustrating. He seemed to love me when we got married, but now he's embarrassed to be seen with me in last year's shoes. You know what he said? Just stay home." Albert clasped his head. They really had had a similar conversation. Gloria pulled out the boots they bought her at the end of winter. He couldn't even remember if she wore them once or twice. And now, as autumn was ending this year, she tried to put them on, but they wouldn't fit her calves. She managed to zip them up somehow, but they were bulging out at the top. She turned around and said, "I need money for new boots." Albert calmly responded, "Last year, when you said these boots wouldn't last for 10,000 rubs, someone promised me that they'd be good for a couple of years. You can forget about new boots. No, seriously, can't you see? Maybe someone needs to move more and eat less." That was Albert's fatal mistake. Gloria got so angry that they got into a full-blown argument. He had indeed said so. Stay at home, don't go out with your friends. Today was just madness. She didn't directly address him. It was as if she was talking to herself, but loud enough for him to hear. He endured for an hour, then he couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up. "Tell me, what do you want? You're pushing me for a reason. What are you after?" She looked at him challengingly. "And what can you do?" "Anything? What's the point of expecting anything from you? You're just an empty space." Albert clenched his fists, looked at his wife for a moment, and suddenly realized what she was waiting for. She was waiting for him to lose control so she could break his life completely. With clear captions, he turned and headed for the door, hearing her say as he left, "I told you so." I had nowhere to go, so I went to work. There's always a lot to do there, and then you can even take a nap on the couch. The desk officers chuckled understandingly. Lately, Albert had been spending the night at work quite often. The desk officer himself had recently gone through a divorce, so he could sympathize with Albert's situation. Albert had no intention of going home today. He had spent the whole night with papers, only lying down on the couch towards morning. He hadn't really gotten enough sleep. He was irritable, but at least he had come to the grim conclusion that he couldn't patch things up. A divorce was necessary. It was no way to live. Yes, and the love had faded away as if it had never been there. He filed for divorce. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he didn't expect it to be so daunting. His mother-in-law and wife seemed to have lost their minds. They called him, wrote to him, screamed at him. They promised that he would never see Luis again. Albert remained silent in the face of their attacks, borrowed money from a friend, and rented a small apartment. The one they had lived in was also his, inherited from his grandmother. But if Gloria and Luis decided to stay there, let them live there. He would be content. Albert was returning from work, and it was already dark outside. Suddenly, someone moaned from behind the bushes. Albert stopped. Odd, this area was quiet. No incidents ever occurred here because it was a police sector, and in general, nothing ever happened in the town. Everyone practically knew each other. Sure, there were some occasional incidents, but more often than not, they were caused by some outsiders. The locals rarely did more than get into fights or drunkenly crash their cars somewhere. He looked around. There was no one in sight. He took a step towards the bushes. "Who's there?" In response, there was silence, just a rustling sound. Albert pushed the bushes aside and immediately saw eyes, huge and filled with fear. A young woman was sitting in front of him, right on the grass, covering herself with her hands. She wasn't wearing any clothes. She just looked and remained silent, tears streaming down her cheeks. He sat down in front of her, quietly took off his shirt, and draped it over her. She quickly wrapped it around herself. "Please help me." Albert noticed dark marks on her wrists, resembling the marks from handcuffs or ropes or something similar. This lady needed to be taken to the police. But right now, there was no one there. They would lock her up until morning. "Damn, can you stand up?" She nodded slightly and began to get up. Albert could see that it was difficult for her. He lifted her up, helped her stand. He thought for a moment and then led her to the apartment he was renting. The one they used to live in was also his property, inherited from his grandmother. But if Gloria and Luis wanted to stay there, he was fine with that. Albert opened the door and held it for her. "Go ahead." She looked at him, her eyes wide with gratitude, and stepped inside. She shivered a bit, probably from the cold. Albert went to the thermostat and adjusted it, then turned to her. "You must be freezing. Wait here, I'll bring you some clothes and a blanket." He went to his room, found an old t-shirt he had never liked because it was too long, almost knee-length. Gloria had intentionally bought him such old-fashioned clothes. He returned to the living room and handed it to her. "There's a bathroom there. Take a bath, and then we'll talk. Technically, I should have taken you to the police, but where it's nighttime, and they wouldn't have done anything anyway." "Thank you, I appreciate this." "You're a police officer, yes? Will you help me?" "I will." "Go ahead, I'll make some tea or coffee for you. What do you prefer?" "Thank you. Coffee. I haven't had coffee in a year." The girl disappeared into the bathroom, and Albert started to ponder. While they were talking, he had discreetly observed her. Not just marks on her arms, but on her legs too. It seemed like she had been in shackles. Clearly, there was quite a story behind it, but most likely she wasn't from the local area. Nothing like that could have happened in their town. 15 minutes later, the girl emerged from the bathroom, and Albert looked at her with surprise. She was very beautiful, but for her frailty and those dreadful marks. He noticed marks on her neck as well. "Have a seat. Coffee's ready." I'm listening attentively. I need to decide what to do about your situation by morning. The girl took a sip of coffee, closed her eyes savoring it, then she looked at him. It's a long story. How should I tell it? In detail or just the main points? No, let's go into details, if you don't mind. I'll be taking notes, so I don't have to redo the same work later. She closed her eyes as if preparing herself for the memories. My name is Christina, and my husband did all this to me. We met back in college. I fell in love with him instantly, to the point where I couldn't even breathe without him. Oliver was never known for good behavior, and I liked him even more for that. I wasn't like that. I was always quiet, calm, never taking initiative. I was heading home, and Oliver and his friends were standing near the entrance. One of his friends started hitting on me, and when the guy began twisting my arm, Oliver pushed him away. He walked me home. He was so strong, so handsome. I fell for him right away. The next day he walked me home again. I had a small apartment allocated to me by the state. Oliver lived with his parents, who were well known in our town. We started dating. He was splurging money left and right. But for me, it was a shock. I grew up in an orphanage and then went to study, always counting every penny. In short, I was overwhelmed. We got acquainted with each other's friends. Many of them looked at me with pity, and I couldn't understand what they didn't like about Oliver. Yes, he was impulsive, a bit restless, but that was part of his charm. A year later, we got married. His parents gifted us a big house, and that's when the problems began. Not right away, but gradually, so I didn't even notice it myself. My husband worked somewhere for his father, brought home good money, but he didn't give it to me. He provided everything we needed, even buying my clothes himself. I even got used to this situation. I didn't have to run around stores trying to find what we needed. I could just focus on the house, especially since it was a brand new one. I liked it all so much that I even stopped going beyond our gates. Looking at how much I enjoyed making our home cozy, Oliver suggested that I quit school, but I protested. Oliver, I have only one more year left. How can I quit now? But I don't understand why you need this education. My wife won't be working anyway, so education isn't necessary. But I want to finish college. He fell silent then, but I saw a glint in his eyes. I was a bit scared, and he acted like he was offended. I soon felt ashamed and began to think that he might be right. After all, we had enough money, we had a big house, and what if we have kids? Nevertheless, something stopped me, and I continued my studies. That year, Oliver often stayed late at work, not coming home at night. I suffered, it hurt and was so disappointing. When my studies were over, I decided that I needed to confront my husband, let him decide what we're going to be, a normal family, or if he's going to keep fooling around. But he wouldn't engage in the conversation, so I decided to follow him and catch him in the act. I quickly found out everything. By the way, Oliver wasn't very discreet about it. I caused a huge scene. I yelled at his girl, pulled all her hair out. Oliver watched it all as if from a distance. He didn't feel sorry for me or the other girl. We went home. I was determined to pack my things and leave that house. But as soon as we entered, he hit me. I fell and stared at him in terror, and he leaned over me and said, "No woman will tell me what to do. Your place is in the kitchen and the bedroom. Anything else is none of your business. I won't live with you. You'll do what I tell you from this day on. You won't take a single step without my permission. Don't even think about it. I'm packing my things, and you can find yourself another fool." I was so scared, but I decided to go through with it. I had just managed to stand up when he hit me again. He kept hitting me for a long time, telling me that I should know my duties and never open my mouth. Sometimes I would black out, sometimes I could feel them, Oliver. After I could no longer resist, he liked it that way, first hitting me, then fulfilling his marital duty. I lay there for 2 weeks. Oliver brought some pills and ointments. After 2 weeks, I could barely get up. During that time, he took care of everything around the house, even fed me with a spoon. He apologized a few times, saying something had come over him. All I could think about was escaping, but it wasn't that simple. While I was lying there recovering, Oliver put bars on all the windows and changed the locks. I simply couldn't get out. One time when Oliver came home drunk, I took his keys. My big mistake was deciding to rush into the room and grab my bag with clothes. He had my documents, but I was ready to run without them. But as I was opening the door, I heard from behind, "And where's my beloved wife planning to go?" I was horrified and collapsed to the floor. He was already cruel, and when he was drunk, after that educational experience, I lay there for a month. I heard some work going on in the basement, but I couldn't even imagine what it was. When I started to get up, Oliver kindly organized a tour for me. "Come, dear, I'll show you what I've come up with." We went down to the basement, which he had significantly expanded, and there was a large cage in the corner. Inside was a bed, a bucket, and a faucet. "What's this, Oliver?" "Why, it's for you, dear. I need to work, and you distract me. I have to constantly worry about whether you've escaped or not." He pushed me into the cage and closed it. I rushed to the bars. "Oliver, what are you doing?" "You're sick." "Let me out." "Don't shout. Nobody will hear you anyway." "Of course, I'll come by. We'll have our chats. After all, I'm still your husband. Marital duty hasn't been abolished." He chuckled disgustingly, then continued, "I'll even let you go for a walk around the basement, that is. But who knows, you might still attack me, so you'll be on a leash." And then I saw what he was talking about. There were chains by the exit of the cage. Not just chains, but actual chains, and on them, there were these large cuffs, more like shackles. Albert listened to all this and couldn't fathom whether he should believe it at all. It's madness. No one seemed to have noticed the girl's disappearance. Although if she's from an orphanage, it's not surprising. Who would care about her? Her husband is either insane or thinks he's the ruler of the world. She never mentioned whether she's local or who her husband is, but Albert decided not to interrupt. He was taking notes in his notebook. It might come in handy later. Albert stood up, put the kettle back on the stove. "Aren't you tired?" "Very tired. Everything hurts. But I'll tell you everything. I need to get it off my chest, otherwise, I'll go crazy." Albert placed another cup in front of Christina, and she continued, "He hardly hit me anymore, just a bit of choking or pinching. He found a new entertainment." Oliver was always very handsome, never lacked female attention. Now he'd come and tell me with whom, where, how. If I tried to cover my ears, he'd hit my hands. I know everything, whom he met, where, and even how it all happened. I know that almost all women cheat on their husbands. I didn't. What did I deserve this for? Christina teared up softly. Albert stood up. "Christina, you have to give us the name of this person, and you'll need to go to the hospital. We need documented evidence of the bruises, injuries, and everything. He'll find me and kill me." "Well, that's unlikely if we act quickly. No one has escaped from our facilities. At least not yet." "All right, I don't have a choice anyway. It's Oliver Adams." Albert sat down heavily on a chair. "Adams, the mayor's son, that's him?" "Yes." Christina was right. They won't be able to hide her in the hospital, and in general, if the mayor gets upset, what should be done? And then Albert remembered his friend. They studied together, but then his friend got married and moved to the capital. Initially, they stayed in touch, even met occasionally. But then Gloria stopped being happy with guests altogether. Stephen understood everything, and now he only called on holidays. Albert knew that his friend worked right where the authorities sent influence over everything. "Christina, go rest. I'll make up a bed for you on the couch, and we might have to wait with the hospital. In this case, I need to make a call." Christina obediently got up and followed him. She lay down on the couch and closed her eyes. Bliss was written all over her face. Albert quietly closed the door behind him, then returned to the kitchen and took out his phone. "Hey, Steve, how's it going?" "Sorry for calling so late." "Albert, it's great to hear from you." "Don't worry, I'm still at work." Albert glanced at the clock, 2:30. Well, Stephen was consistent. Work always came first for him. Steve, I need your help. What? You want to go underground to escape your Gloria? Sorry, bad joke. Yeah, it's okay. I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. Wow, did she finally get on your nerves? Yeah, kind of. Haven't you married yet? Oh, no, heaven forbid. I might end up with the same, which is yours. Okay, so it's not a regular call at night. You're right, not a regular call. Today, I found a girl. Oh, promising star, the continuation will be even more interesting. Albert tried to summarize everything that Christina had told him. Stephen listened attentively, then he whistled. Not a bad case you've got, but I don't get how I can help. You're an investigator, get it rolling. You can get a gold star for a case like this. You see, Steve, the main person involved is the mayor's son. Not bad. Albert sighed, but you understand I can't handle it on my own. I understand. Can you wait just for an hour or so? I'll contact my superiors right away. Stephen, of course, thank you. Albert even managed to doze off right on the table. A phone call woke him up. He grabbed the receiver. Hello? Albert, we're on our way. How many of you? 4 of us and a doctor. We need official documents regarding the injuries, so by the time we get there, you should have initiated a case so we can take him right away. Time it properly. He shouldn't be released. We have to take him. Don't worry, I'll file it as unknown girl. We're planning to be there around 10, maybe a bit earlier. Albert woke up Christina. Christina, I'll have to leave now. It's about your case. You mustn't leave the apartment. Don't open the door for anyone. In general, act like you're not here. Eat, drink coffee, don't do the dishes. Our faucet makes a loud noise when turned on. Do you understand? Yes, I understand everything. Albert rushed out the door. So much still needed to be done, and it was already almost 6. Oddly enough, there was already commotion at the office. Albert peered into the duty room. What happened? Guess what? The mayor's son's wife was kidnapped. They're demanding the large ransom. No way! How did it happen? No clue. The whole town is in an uproar. No sign of anyone anywhere. Would the mayor get that much money? He's an honest guy. They laughed at the successful joke, and Albert headed to his office. The case was taking a different turn. If anyone saw him dragging the girl to his place, there would be no escape. The mayor needed a scapegoat, or rather, his son did. It could easily turn out that Albert was the one who tortured her. He was almost done when someone knocked on the door. Come in. His immediate superior walked in. Albert, what are you up to? Just working on some paperwork. We need to go somewhere, check something. I can't really. Maybe in a couple of hours. What's that you have on your desk? The boss moved closer. Oh, that's a new case I'm starting. Let me see. Ah, a beaten girl. Where was she found? I see. Tell you what, you let me know where this girl is right now, and we'll close the case quickly. Stephen walked into the office, accompanied by a few more men. Good day, we're here to pick up the case. The boss noticeably paled. Which case? I believe it's the one you're holding in your hands. Stephen presented his identification. The boss carefully read it and headed towards the exit. We need complete confidentiality, so my guy will stay with you to avoid any misunderstandings. Stephen looked after the boss, then turned to Albert. Well, wait a bit, our team should be here soon. Half an hour later, after leaving some officers and 2 of his men at the police station, they headed to Albert's place. He opened the door and went in. Christina was nowhere to be seen. Christina, where are you? The door of the closet creaked softly, and the girl emerged. I'm sorry, I got really scared. Christina, a doctor will examine you now, and you'll need to tell everything in detail to this person, everything. In the meantime, explain to us the layout of your cell. How can we get there? Christina asked for a sheet of paper and quickly sketched the diagram. Stephen looked at it and raised an eyebrow. You're talented. Christina managed a weak smile. I studied drawing diagrams for 5 years. They pulled up to the mayor's son's house, but there was no answer for a while at the intercom located by the gate. Finally, the door opened. The operative silently spread across the property while Albert and Stephen entered the house. They weren't alone. Several other men were with them, and as it turned out, not without reason. Oliver was home, sitting in an armchair, sipping on brandy. A rifle lay on his knees. "Oh, police officers found that. Did you hand her over?" "I'm about to kill her." Stephen smirked, approached him, and tipped the rifle. "Nice toy." Oliver's eyes bulged at such audacity. He jumped up. "Hey, put your hands down." Stephen made a quick gesture, and Oliver fell back into the chair, holding his nose. "Yeah, you're in shock. Do you know who you're messing with?" "I'm about to call my dad, and you won't be walking this earth anymore." "And who's your daddy?" "My dad's the mayor." Oliver shouted, spittle flying in different directions. "Just the mayor? I thought you were talking about God." "So, you're a little demigod. Seems like you guys are getting carried away here, deciding who lives and who ends up in a cage." Oliver chuckled. "So you guys are all worked up because of this?" "She practically begged for it, asked me to build a cage, bring handcuffs, some messed up stuff. Don't forget to call Daddy, or you might miss something." Oliver realized that something was off. The cops were acting rudely for some reason, and that just couldn't be. Nervously, he dialed a number. "Dad, come over. The police are here. They're not behaving well." As soon as Oliver hung up and looked defiantly at Stephen, he said, "Pack up and head to the holding cell." Oliver's jaw dropped, and my dad Albert snickered. "Your dad will join you a little later." Oliver was taken away, and they headed to the basement. Once they saw the sill, a small thought crossed their minds. Maybe the girl had exaggerated. They immediately called in a team of experts. While they were en route, Albert and his friend looked around. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" "No, I don't even get the point, but he had plenty of women. There are some worthless people out there who need to assert themselves naturally at the expense of the weak. Every time finding a new weakling. It's tiring." So he found himself a plaything. Soon, the experts arrived, and work was in full swing. Seasoned men were shaking their heads in disbelief, imagining what might have happened in that cell. "Cease immediately. Everyone out of the house." An angry man was descending the stairs. He was dressed in a suit and tie, apparently Oliver's daddy. "Who are you? Who gave you permission?" Stephen calmly presented his identification, the warrant, and something else, but the man wouldn't calm down. "I'll have you ground into dust, understand?" He started making a call, and from Albert's understanding, it was to the police chief Thomas. "What's wrong with you? What am I paying you for?" "What?" But it seemed like someone on the other end hung up. The mayor looked at them in confusion. "Guys, maybe we should go upstairs and talk." Stephen smiled. "Why not? Let's have a chat, shall we?" They followed the mayor, and on the way, they speculated how much the mayor would offer them. As they expected, the mayor began offering them money. He did it without any embarrassment in front of the people present in the house. Stephen turned to Albert. "Well, do you think it's enough?" "I think so. Pack him up for now on bribery charges, and we'll sort it out from there." They worked until evening. There were so many clues that they wouldn't even need to present evidence. By evening, they returned home. In the kitchen, there was a person taking statements and a doctor. The doctor spoke first. "Listen, the girl needs to go to the hospital. Apparently, her husband was a complete monster. She had significant injuries, and an inflammatory process has already started. Now, you can call an ambulance." "Great, I'll go with her." "You can pick me up from the hospital in the morning." "Yes, okay." As they were taking Christina away, she couldn't even stand up anymore, but she was still smiling. It might hurt, it might feel bad, but she was free. Not there. Not everyone left. The next morning, Stephen stayed behind to assist Albert with the documents. Go to court. Then I'll relax. When I was reading the statements, it felt like I was watching a horror movie. I really want that idiot to be declared sane. Let him learn how to behave in prison. 2 days later, Stephen woke up to some incredible smells. He went to the kitchen, where Albert was, and nearly stumbled. What's this? These are pastries, but you only get 2. I'll take some to Christina. She's an orphan. No one's going to visit her. To Christina, you say, my friend? Have you perhaps fallen in love, Stevie? Come on, are you out of your mind? Well, why not? Christina is very beautiful. If it weren't for that vampire, she could have gotten married quite successfully. Exactly, successfully. She will get married, but me, I'm the loser, that's clear. Your Gloria did quite a number on you with her brainwashing. Well done. She should work in law enforcement, Stevie. All right, give me another one, will you? They're delicious. I might be a bit late. Put me down for that. Sure, go ahead, Romeo. Albert tried to nurture his friend's side, but he dodged. He knocked gently on the door of the hospital room, peeked his head in. May I come in? Christina smiled immediately. Albert, how glad I am to see you. I brought you some pastries. Baked them myself. You? Well, yes. Christina looked at him skeptically, then at the pastries. Albert saw her disbelief. Really, I've enjoyed baking since childhood. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Nobody has ever baked pastries for me. How are you? Oh, everything's fine. Everyone here is so kind. The nurses, the caregivers, the doctors. Seemed a bit intimidating to me. He's so big with a beard, but he turned out to be very nice. That's good, Christina. I'll come to visit you tomorrow and the day after. I just need to go to work. Christina smiled. Please come. I'll be waiting for you. Can I ask something? What, Christina? Could you bring me a book or something? It's really boring here. Of course, I'll bring one. I'll drop by after work today. Albert could see that the girl's eyes lit up with joy. He himself felt happy too, although he wasn't quite sure why. Albert was about to leave, but then he sat back down. Christina, forgive me for bringing this up again, but how did you manage to escape? Christina looked at him attentively. It was such a fortunate coincidence that I still can't believe in myself. That evening, Oliver came home in high spirits. I already knew what awaited me, so I was sitting in the corner, barely moving. He came downstairs, started unlocking the door, but then he got a call. He dropped the lock and went back upstairs. I heard him arguing with someone. Then he went outside. Where did I find the strength? I ran upstairs and saw that the door to the street was open. Oliver was arguing with the neighbor. The neighbor turned around and somehow managed to crash into the gate. I hid behind the rose bushes. When Oliver rushed back into the house to call his father or the police, I ran out through the gate and started running. Well, I managed to run about 100 meters, no more. Then I felt like I was falling. I hid behind some bushes and kept going. Sometimes on all fours, sometimes crawling. And then when I couldn't go on any longer, my stomach and legs hurt so much. That's when you found me. Albert clenched his fists in silence. Forgive me, Christina. Get some rest. I'll bring you some books and something tasty today. Oh, no need for anything tasty. The food here is wonderful. So delicious and so much of it. Albert had time to think. I wonder if hospital food is delicious and plentiful. What were they feeding her at home? He read in the statements that Christina had spent about 2 years in that cage, and she had a miscarriage. She hadn't told Albert about it, but she had told the investigator from the Capitol. She talked about how Oliver knew about her pregnancy and did everything to make sure she didn't have the baby. This girl had been through so much, and she was only 25. He rushed to work just to request time off from the new boss. "I have a court hearing today." "Divorce." "My condolences." "It's fine. I filed for divorce myself." Stephen caught up with him. "Still, until all the expert results are in, there's not much to do." "I'll support you." The trial went pretty much as Albert expected. Luckily, Louisa wasn't there. The mud being slung at Albert was so overwhelming that it was impossible to counter. He stayed silent, simply looking at Gloria and thinking, how did I end up like this? Or was she mad like this? They remained in session until late in the evening. Gloria spent a long and tedious time arguing that Albert wasn't human, that he didn't bring any money, that her parents supported them, and therefore, the apartment should go to them. Stephen listened to it all as if he was watching a really interesting movie. Albert couldn't help himself. He leaned towards his friend. "Listen, you're so attentive. It's like you're the one getting divorced, not me. Don't interrupt. Your Gloria helps me build the confidence that I should never get married." Albert smirked and stopped bothering his friend. Let him soak it up. He didn't mind. It lowered the chances of ending up in a similar situation. The judge turned out to have a sense of humor and didn't mention until the end that Albert had transferred the apartment to Louisa. After Gloria spent almost an hour convincing everyone in the courtroom that she was right, the judge asked, "I don't understand. What apartment are you talking about?" "Albert doesn't have an apartment." "What do you mean?" "What, you bastard, sold the apartment with us?" Gloria's eyes gleamed with righteous anger, but the judge cut her off. "If you're talking about the apartment you're living in, it actually belongs to your shared son, Luis." Laughter filled the courtroom, and Gloria turned red. They were officially divorced, and Albert didn't even stay to discuss how to retrieve his belongings. The important thing was that he could pick up Luis for the weekend, according to the court decision. They stepped out onto the street, and Albert said, "All right, Stevie, you head home. I need to buy some books for Christina," as she asked. "Christina, Stephen. Don't even start." "Well, I won't. Strange guys we are. Just got out of one situation and already looking to step into another swamp." "Stephen, come on. Don't say that. If one person is like that, it doesn't mean everyone is." "Albert. Can I come with you? I'm bored. I won't say anything extra." "Sure, come on. You won't give up, will you?" They entered the hospital room, laden with bags of fruits and books, and Stephen even coughed up and bought Christina a tablet as a gift. Albert looked at him with surprise, and Stephen sighed and said, "Well, that's for the future. Gotta be friends with friends' wives." He chuckled. Albert gave him an edge. Anyway, Christina had a visitor. She turned as they entered, and Albert noticed that his friend Stephen somehow froze. The girl was a petite brunette. She smiled so sweetly that Stephen seemed a bit flustered. He marched up to her and said, "Stephen." The girl stood up, smiled. "Milana." Turns out she was Christina's friend. They used to be close, but then Oliver forbade them from communicating. Christina asked the nurse to try calling her at home, and so here she was. In short, Stephen disappeared. Albert never thought that his tough friend could be like this. He couldn't find the right words, but Christina gave him a hint. He looks quite smitten when he's looking at Milana. Albert left, exactly, absolutely smitten. Now Albert and Stephen went to the hospital together, as if just casually, but Milana also came after work. At the same time, before they were supposed to discharge Christina, Albert tracked down her apartment. It had been turned into a storage room for electronics that were being sold at the market. In short, Oliver had simply handed it over to the traders. By the way, they managed to solve another case right away, albeit involving shoplifting. Albert and Stephen cleaned up the place with a lot of help from Milana, so everything was ready by the time Christina was getting discharged. They brought Christina there and threw a little celebration. Albert felt a bit sad. There would be no reason to see her now. Stephen stood up. I have an announcement for you. Milana and I have decided to get married. Christina clapped her hands, hugged her friend. Albert also hugged his friend. Stevie, what about? Shush. Just tell me, how much longer will you keep thinking they might take your Christina away? Such a girl. And then Albert realized Stephen was right. What was he afraid of? So what if he got turned down? It just wasn't meant to be. He turned to Christina. I have an announcement too. Everyone fell silent. Christina's voice rang out. I agree, I agree, I agree. She rushed into his arms, and Albert looked at her in astonishment. Yes, I fell in love with you the moment I stepped into your home. Albert grinned foolishly, and Stephen laughed at him. Well, and the investigator couldn't crack such a simple case. Everyone could see it except you. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.